Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
The holidays are back at Starbucks, and there's so much to share. With classics like Caramel Brulee Latte, Peppermint Mocha, and Chestnut Praline Latte, we're celebrating everyone's flavor of festivity. Order yours in the app.
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimp and Way.
Yes, MailChimp and Way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp?
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
Every child should experience the life-changing benefits that come from play and sport. That's been the mission for over 2 decades for one organisation looking to halt the decline in children's well-being in the 21st century. In that time, they've helped more than 4.7 million young people participate in sport and physical activity. I'm John.
And I'm Michael. And they do this hugely important work through a network of over 4,000 member schools. And in this episode of Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy, I have a personal reason for wanting to hear from our special guests as I witnessed their brilliant work in action at the school games earlier this year in Loughborough.
And I'm Ali Oliver, Chief Executive of the charity, the Youth Sport Trust, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you, Ali, for joining us. We'll hear about Michael's story and experience in a moment. But first, 20 years of trying to get children active and participating in sport. Is it worse now than when it started?
Such a good question. So actually, the charity was established in '95, so we're coming up to our third decade. But in some ways, it is yes. I think it won't be any surprise to anybody listening in that the world has changed dramatically over that time, and childhood's changed, and there are many things competing for children's time and attention. But we've also seen, I guess, a move to a more sedentary society, and in many ways, when it comes to children, a more risk-averse society where children's what's often called their roaming radius is smaller. They spend less time in the streets. The streets aren't such a safe place from cars and other things, and there are fewer places for children and young people to go and be active than perhaps 20 years ago.
Is it a losing battle?
I really hope not, and we believe it isn't. Absolutely. I mean, it's very clear to us at the Youth Sport Trust that very simple steps can reignite children's love of movement. We know we're designed to move as human beings, and we also know that children come into the world playing. They're moving and playing, and you have to talk to any parent of a toddler, kind of stop them moving, and running about and running away is often the challenge. But what we've tended to do through society and indeed through education is make it either harder or less desirable to be active. And I think what we're trying to do on one hand is reimagine, particularly in education, what school life is like, create more active schools, and also reimagine physical education as an experience which is of value to and enjoyable for every young person. And also at the same time trying to shift the dial a little bit on the science. So we know when children move, their brains develop more effectively, their cognitive performance improves, their likelihood of depression and anxiety goes down. And there's tombs of science on this, which we probably haven't got time to talk about, but there's a lot of evidence that this is the case, yet it's not commonly understood. And people think that children should be out playing just because, they have a right to play. And that's of course important, but there are so many other good reasons as well.
So what is the Youth Sport Trust and what is it that you do?
So we are a charity. We often describe ourselves to people who work in business as a B2B charity. So we very rarely work with young people. So your experiences of the school games in the summer is one of the few opportunities where we deliver directly to young people. Our purpose really is to work with the systems and individuals who work with young people. And we've honed our expertise over the 20 to 30 years we've been around in education. So a lot of what we're doing is equipping educators with the confidence, competence, skills, and content to make sport and play and physical activity more inclusive, more accessible, more relevant, and more fun for young people. And then at the same time, we do a whole heap of work that we call empowering young people, which is unlocking the creativity, the leadership potential, and indeed, in modern day, the influence that young people have on each other. So we do a lot of work around the development of young people as leaders, as peer leaders, as organisers of activity, and as a voice to influence us as adults when we're structuring and shaping sport for young people. So there's a teacher bit to what we do, or an educator piece to what we do, and there's a young people part to what we do. And what we're always trying to do through all of these things is develop young people's enjoyment, so they have more of a positive attitude towards being active. But also we collect data on things like communication skills, self-belief, team working skills, all of our interventions constantly refined and honed. So we are building something, some kind of social and cultural capital that's of value to those young people beyond their school life and alongside their active lifestyle.
And I'm guessing you can't do this all by yourself, but what is the size and structure of your organisation, and how does it kind of work day to day?
So thank you for the question. We're a UK charity. So we have staff working in England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Obviously, education is devolved, so we work differently, and we work very closely with the sports councils in all 4 home countries, but also with the education departments and health departments. We're about 100 full-time equivalents as the charity, about 40 based in our headquarters up in Loughborough on the sport park here on the fringes of the university campus, and then the rest of our staff are spread all over the country. And the head office staff are obviously running the back office, but also developing the content. I mentioned earlier that we equip educators and empower young people. So there's a lot of training that we do. They'll develop a lot of materials. We do a lot of convening, bringing together schools to learn from each other and share practice. And increasingly, we do that with national governing bodies of sport, other charities and organisations that are using play, sport, physical activity to develop young people's lives. We run a membership scheme, so schools can buy into the services of the charity. And through that, we will go in and work with a senior leadership team or a PE department or again, increasingly with those responsible for mental health or special educational needs and disabilities, where we're really seeing in a world where, sadly, I talk about the 1 in 5s. 1 in 5 children leave our primary schools obese or at risk of obesity. 1 in 5 young people between the age of 16 have got a probable mental health condition, and 1 in 5 children are persistently absent, missing 10% more of their education. So how do we put sport to work and play to work as a vehicle to counteract some of those physical, mental, and social well-being challenges that exist?
You mentioned about working with schools and working with the teachers and helping them. There's so much pressure on teachers, though, not just for sport, maybe some drama, some music, PHSE and all that. There's so much that they've got to do, as well as teaching them, maths and English, etc., etc. How do they welcome you to be part of that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've lost over 40,000 hours of physical education from our schools in this country since London hosted the Olympic and Paralympic Games with its strapline Inspire a Generation. So, it's a really well-placed question. Have schools got the time, the capacity, and is this something that they prioritise? And I think where we find ourselves today, things are moving really rapidly. In partnership with schools, we created something called the Well School and the Well School Trust, which was a blueprint for how you develop a culture and a climate of schools which embraces that children who are unhappy and unhealthy don't learn. Therefore, if we want to make the best of our science teachers, our maths teachers, our languages teachers, the pedagogy, the great resources we have to have children that are well enough to learn. So we're increasingly building a movement of schools that know their culture, their ethos, their climate has to be one that values well-being, and you can't genuinely value well-being without putting movement and physical activity in the mix. But we're really not asking schools to do more. We're saying do different. Like, I was a former PE teacher, and still today in too many schools, but certainly when I was teaching, PE was really about those young people who had more talent and more ability. And often, too often, I hear that, PE was what put me off sport, because it was very competitive, very exclusive, and I didn't get it, I wasn't good at it, and therefore I got left behind. Actually, we're trying to reimagine how the resource that schools already have in their PE facilities, PE on the timetable, their PE teachers, how do you position that, reposition it, so it is focused on every child, and it is about well-being and the role of well-being in education, as opposed to being about trophies and cups, which, when I was a teacher, that wasn't what it was about. You were running your teams. And while we don't want to be anti-competitive sport, because competitive sport is a really valuable learning experience, imagine if every child was given the opportunity to play for their school if they wanted to, regardless of ability, how much learning we could bring to those young people, instead of focusing all of that opportunity on just the A and B team. So it's about doing differently, not doing more. And I think the more we get that message across, and the more schools exhaust all the things they can do, like having mental health first aiders and counsellors on site, all of that is downstream of the issue. What we're talking about is how do we use play, movement, physical activity and sport to build more resilient young people who are less depressed, less anxious because of their movement, less likely to have body image challenges because they're able to manage a healthy weight perhaps, and young people who see physical activity as an essential part of equipping them to learn and building the employability skills for life. When we've got that, it's not so hard for a school. But trying to twist the arms of teenage girls to another, wouldn't matter whether it's cross country or a tennis or a hockey lesson, that is about skill and performance, when that plays no role in their perceived future or their life today, it's very different. Whereas when you're talking about well-being, and this subject, physical education or after school activities, are about, helping you feel good about yourself, connecting with people on a human level in the digital age, making sure that you can manage your anxieties and your worries, that's a very different proposition. So we're getting there. We're not there. You mentioned 4,000 schools. There's 24,000 schools in England alone. We've got a long way to go. But I think the tide is shifting, and sadly, because we've run out of things to do. We have got a crisis, a wellbeing crisis upon us in terms of young people. And I think it was Desmond Tutu that says, you've got to stop pulling people out of the river who are drowning. We've got to get upstream and stop them from falling in. And that's very much our mantra.
Michael has teenage daughters, so I'll let him pick up on the questions about that. But just quickly, from my point of view, what about parents and the role that they play? You're obviously targeting schools and teachers and trying to reach out to the youngsters, but actually parents need more of a role, don't they?
They do. Again, you're right, particularly for primary children. Family, parents, carers are still the largest influencers on children's attitudes and perceptions of physical activity and sport. As they move into secondary, it's more peers, hence why we do so much around youth leadership and peer leadership. But parents are, and we are tackling that in the early years particularly. We have a training program called Healthy Movers, where we support early years settings to do more and better through their physical development on the curriculum. And there's a Stay in a Play club where we're equipping parents with the same ideas that we're equipping the practitioners with, so that parents can go home, play with their children go away with a rucksack full of little pieces of equipment that they can play in the home. And too often we hear that parents don't know how to play with their child, and it's easier to put a screen in front of them or a tablet in front of them than kind of play with them. So how can we give parents, carers confidence? But also we need to educate parents as much as we can around the benefits of physical activity and that science that I talked about earlier. Many of them are really struggling with children who've become isolated, lonely, anxious, and simply moving. They don't have to play a game of hockey or netball or football. They just need to move, and they will change that. So parents are really important. But one thing I will say, because it's really important in a podcast that I get this across, the chief medical officer's recommendation is children are active for 60 minutes a day for good health and development. In England at the moment, only 40% of children are meeting that guidance. And it's around about 31% of parents that even know that guidance exists. So compared to 5 bits of fruit and veg a day, we're nowhere. We're nowhere on the radar. And it's really important that we communicate 60 active minutes a day. It's something we're lucky to work with Mo Farah as our national school sport champion, and his Mo's mission is 60 minutes a day of PE and sport and play. And the more we can get that message home, that is as important as 5 bits of fruit and vegetable a day, it's important as getting 5 GCSEs. You know, these are important foundations of developing healthy and successful young people who achieve and thrive.
This is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. We're in conversation with Ali Oliver, the CEO at the Youth Sport.
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimpin' way.
Yes, MailChimpin' way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp.
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
Trust. John mentioned I've got teenage daughters, a teenage daughter and one who's about to become a teenager. They go to running club after school every Friday, and one of the big things they like about running club is they get to listen to music while they do it. That's one of the drivers for them to go. The other driver was the fact that they received a series of videos from Olympic sprinter Adam Jamili, who told them all how to warm up, and that was something that I was lucky enough that I was able to help arrange and organise because of John and my work at the Olympics. So my question to you is, how important are elite athletes and those winning medals at the Olympic and the Paralympic Games? Or would that money that Rachel Reeves committed in the budget last week to elite sport be better off coming to guys like you as opposed to buying 14 gold medals in Paris at the Olympic Games, for example?
Michael, I think we need both. I think the aspirational impact of success on a national level is really good for children, particularly younger children. So primary age children are still, again, we talked about inspired by parents and carers. You know, they're inspired by elite athletes. And also, I think we as a nation value sport more when we're successful as a nation. We see, you know, the amazing moments in the Olympic and Paralympic Games are the expressions of humanity and just what human beings are capable of with the right attitude, determination, skill, but also all of the other stuff that happens through sport as a powerful social good. But the Youth Sport Trust, we work with elite athletes, men, women, Paralympic athletes who have basically been on the most extraordinary journey of self-development. And often the thing is we see these athletes appear on the podium and we think they have a different set of genes than us, like they must be different. Actually, when you unpick their story and they tell their story of how they grew an ambition, how they put a team around them, how they bounced back from major disappointments, how they had to make difficult choices through their lives, it's a really powerful journey. So we at the Youth Sport Trust have over 90 retired athletes or those on the verge of retirement who we've trained as mentors, and they deliver mentoring programs in schools, hugely powerful with young people who have become disengaged from education or who are struggling for, you know, all sorts of reasons, where suddenly this person who's got a medal is just like me, is actually just like me. They have the same self-doubt, same worries. They've just over the years developed a skill set, a set of tools. And what those athletes do is they share the tools and the lessons with young people. So I think just the performance is inspiring for younger children. As children get older, those athletes are extraordinary educators of how you succeed against the odds in life. And they've done it through sport. So I think you need both. And I wouldn't want to see our Olympic and Paralympic budgets suffer. But there is no point in investing in all of that if we don't then harness the opportunity that sits at schools. And if that carries on at the same time as cutting or seeing 40,000 hours of PE lost from the curriculum, that's when we have a problem. When you can get the two aligned, then we're cooking on gas, then we can do extraordinary things.
And I mentioned I was at the school games this year, and I was in a bit of a malaise after coming back from Paris. I'll be honest with you, wasn't really sure what to do with myself, having just spent 3.5 weeks at the Olympic Games. And suddenly I was in Loughborough, and you basically staged a mini Olympics. You had all the branding, you had all the sports taking place at the same time, you had a transport network. It was very much like the footprint of an Olympic Games. Tell us what the school games is and why it's important, bearing in mind what you've just said there.
Yeah, so the school games has been around, interestingly, since 2006. It was the brainchild of Richard Cabourn, the then sports minister, who said, if we're going to have an Olympic and Paralympic Games in London, we're going to have a school games in London. And indeed, in 2012, the event that you came to, Michael, was hosted in the Olympic Park, and it was the final test event for a couple of the venues in the Olympic Park. So good old Richard Cabourn, true to his word, kept it happening. But it's amazing. It's been a legacy program that's been going ever since. It's a home country international, particularly giving some of our most talented school-age athletes a multi-sport experience, which acts as a boot camp for them. And it acts as a boot camp actually for the team staff that work with them, whether that's the medics, the team managers, the coaches. If you ask any of those people or the athletes what it's like competing at a major multi-sport games for the first time, it's a shock compared to single sport competition, which is what athletes do, sportsmen and women do all the rest of the time. So it had always had that vision of both inspiring the generation by having a school games national finals alongside a home Olympics, Paralympics. It had a purpose of making sure that our GB athletes, when they go to their first multi-sport games, they've been to a multi-sport environment and they've been through that boot camp and learned some of the lessons. But it's also connected to both a school games program at the grassroots. So the government, at the same time as investing into that event, invested into 450 school games organisers across the country. And they do what I mentioned earlier. They make competitive sport accessible to all children, not just those either with talent, ability or significant family support, all children. And so the national finals now is about talent inclusion. And how do we make sure that the athletes that go and compete at the Olympic and Paralympic Games are reflective of society? Whether that be affluence, whether that be where the education of that young person happened, whether it's their ethnicity. In every sense, we're using the grassroots school games to support more children get into clubs and into sport so that effectively they can be sucked through the system, and the national finals can be an opportunity to bring those who wouldn't have previously sat in national governing body talent pathways. So this year's finals that you were at, Michael, had a lot of athletes who national governing bodies brought to the games who sat outside their usual talent pathway. And what we're doing through that, and with significant help from Sport England and National Lottery, is learning what the barriers are to those young people and how do we need to change our talent and performance systems so we're not just bringing those through who have got access to the resources and sit in a certain segment of society, that everybody as a young person can see they have the opportunity and the chance to go through. So it serves lots of purposes. It's an amazing event. As I say, it happens every other year and has been since 2006. And fingers crossed, if it carries on in the future, it will continue to be both a stepping stone for the most talented going on to Team GB and Paralympics GB, but it will also help young people at the grassroots who might face barriers to get through the system, which would otherwise not be as accessible for them.
And just before I let John jump back in, can I come back next time? I really enjoyed it.
You would be welcome every time. Yeah, we would love to have you.
I can confirm that he was buzzing after that weekend.
I'm so pleased.
He was so miserable after the end of the Olympics, but he was buzzing after that. So thank you. Now, look, Ali, we can't let you go without asking you a little bit about your career as well and how you got to be in charge of the Youth Sport Trust. You were a PE teacher, as you mentioned, head of PE at Millfield College, I think, as well, and also at Team Bath as well.
Yeah, so I trained as a PE teacher, secondary PE teacher, and worked in Southend in Essex in my first part of my career. I then moved to the independent sector, and as you say, took up the role as head of PE at Millfield School, and from there went to the University of Bath to run their initial teacher training program for PE. And it was probably not until I got to the University of Bath, really, and I was training other teachers, that I suddenly realised what a bad teacher I was. I'm teaching about inclusion and about the curriculum for all. And I suddenly realised as a PE teacher, I'd spent a disproportionate amount of time with a very small cohort of young women and girls in my day when physical education was all single sex. And it made me, think very differently about both teacher education, but also what I wanted to be part of. And at the same time, I had an amazing foray into elite sport, because while I was at the University of Bath, the English Institute of Sport was mooted back in the late 90s, when Australia and the Australian Institute was doing amazing things. So I got involved in the English Institute of Sport project. Netball was my sport, so I set up Team Bath franchise, the first full-time netball program in the country. Very lucky to work with a university that was supportive of bringing players to Bath to be educated, but also to be on a full-time program. And then I went to a conference when I was a governor at a local school that we were working on the Team Bath netball program, and I came across the Youth Sport Trust at that conference, and I realised there was a charity that was passionate about all the things I was, both the development of sport, the development of young people, and significantly the development of society and better communities, better people, better outcomes through sport. And I joined in 2004, not as the chief exec, and made myself a nuisance for several years, and then took on the chief exec role in the end of 2016.
You mentioned about Team Bath and about the first full-time netball squad in the country. The fact that Team Bath won't be in the Super League, the new Super League next season.
Yes.
How disappointing is that? Is there no netball at all in like the west of the country, apart from I think Cardiff in Wales have got a team, haven't they?
Yeah, so I mean, hugely disappointing on a personal level, because it was a very successful franchise in terms of development, particularly development of players, many of whom ended up in other franchises, some of our original Team Bath players have been the commentators in the sport. We've got a national coach in Jess Thirlby, who was who was the first player that I recruited to the Team Bath netball program. So hugely successful. But listen, the sport is absolutely right and determined to try and become more commercial, and that required spectator venues, which there isn't of the size that was needed in Bath or the surrounding southwest area. But the good news is the Team Bath program was always about development, and it's going to continue, and it does continue now, to have a development program. And hundreds of young women and girls turned up for the trials for the development program there, which, as long as that stays, and there are opportunities. As a kid, I grew up in Cornwall, and I know how difficult it is in the southwest to get opportunities. Bath needs to stay, and as far as I know, the people who are leading the franchise and the university want to keep it as a development hub that continues to feed. And we know in sport that you need the clubs that play in the Premiership and all that, but without the feeder infrastructure, without good development work happening around the country, we don't get those successful teams. So I think everything that we started still continues. And maybe one day when we do have a venue, which we need one in the southwest, let's face it, not just for netball, let's get that venue, and then let's get Team Bath back, not just developing players, but competing at the highest level.
And for people that were listening very closely to that answer, I should point them in the direction of a couple of Team Bath podcasts that Anything But Footy has done in the past. Netball fans listening, I should point you in the direction of Centre Pass, the official London Pulse podcast, again, produced by Anything But Footy. And talking of venues, the Copper Box, of course, is a terrific netball venue, and people should listen to the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park podcast, also produced by Anything But Footy. There's my plugs out the way. Finally, I'll just let you plug your organisation, Alison. I know every year you release an annual impact report. What are we set with the past year to learn from your impact report? And, what, if we speak in a year or so's time, would be success for you?
Thank you. Well, the success for the Youth Sport Trust, I think, looking ahead for the next year, will probably be three things. stuff that we're absolutely in control of, which is the impact that our interventions have on young people. So we've got 76% of young people reporting improved confidence, 74% more enjoyment, 73% more resilience. We want to keep pushing that up. So we will continue to grow our programs with the support of funders, donors, people like Sport England Lottery and others. So anyone wants to resource us, or you're interested in having your brand associated with all this great stuff with young people and their families, let us know. We want physical education to have a stronger status and value in the school curriculum. So that would be a success if we could stop that reduction in hours of PE, and more importantly, physical education was seen as an access subject for every child to be healthier and happier and therefore learn better. And then finally, I think for the charity, what we would really want to see is more talk in the public domain. So thank you, Anything But Footy, for allowing me to talk, because that issue around parents' awareness and understanding of the importance of movement and physical activity is the biggest thing. If we can shift society's attitudes, so parents wouldn't dream of ever writing a note to excuse their child from PE and sport, wouldn't dream of going to a parents' evening and not asking the question about how active is my child, and is my child developing their physical literacy in the same way they're developing their numeracy and literacy. Any head teacher wouldn't dream of cutting time on the curriculum. Any politician, education secretary or minister would prioritise getting our children moving if we want healthier, happier, more successful learners who not only achieve but thrive at the same time.
If those people could harness maybe 1% of your enthusiasm and optimism, then I think we are on the right track, very much so. Alison Oliver, CEO at the Youth Sport Trust, thank you for speaking to Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Attention everyone! Wayfair's Black Friday preview sale is here early. Right now, get up to 70% off everything you need for the season ahead. Save on furniture and bedding, cookware and holiday decor, and tons more. Now's the time to score big on finds to feast, get festive, and get comfortable all season long. Plus, enjoy fast and easy shipping with delivery in time for the holidays. Save up to 70% off early Black Friday deals. Shop now at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.